The boardroom was packed. 20 people sat around the mahogany table, all eyes on me as I presented the quarterly results for Winston Industries, our biggest client. My hands were steady, my voice confident. I'd handled this account for 3 years, turning it into our firm's crown jewel. The PowerPoint slides flowed smoothly, each chart showing impressive growth numbers that made the executives nod with approval. Then the door burst open. Carson, our VP of Sales and Marketing, stormed in holding a manila folder. His face was red, his eyes blazing with fury. The room fell silent. Even the Winston executives stopped taking notes. The air conditioning hummed loudly in the sudden quiet. "Kelly Lane," he announced, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "You're a fraud." My heart stopped. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me in shock. Mr. Winston, the CEO himself, raised his eyebrows. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. My mouth went dry. "What are you talking about?" I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. Carson slammed the folder on the table. Papers scattered everywhere. Office supplies. Stolen. "We have proof." Security appeared in the doorway. Carson pointed at me like I was a criminal. "Escort her out, now." As they led me away, I caught one last glimpse of the Winston team. Their faces showed confusion, disappointment, disgust. The door slammed behind me with finality. My career was over. Or so I thought. 3 months earlier, everything was perfect. I walked into the office each morning knowing I was the best account manager in the building. The Winston account was my baby. I'd grown it from a small contract into a multi-million-dollar partnership. My desk was covered with thank you notes from satisfied clients and industry awards that sparkled under the fluorescent lights. Carson always watched me with envy. He'd hover near my desk, asking about commission rates and client interactions. His cologne was too strong, his smile too practiced. At first I thought he was just being friendly. I was wrong. "Kelly," he'd said one Tuesday, sliding into the chair across from my desk, "I've been thinking about the Winston account." "What about it?" I asked, not looking up from my computer. "Maybe we should restructure it. Share the workload. To help you manage the stress." I finally looked at him. His smile was too wide, too eager. His expensive suit couldn't hide the hunger in his eyes. "I'm not stressed, Carson. I've got this handled." "Of course you do," he said, but his eyes said something different. "Just think about it." That night, I told my roommate about the conversation. She frowned over her coffee cup. "He wants your commission," she said simply. I laughed it off then. I shouldn't have. The sabotage started small. My assistant, Rebecca, was suddenly reassigned to another department. When I asked why, HR said it was for operational efficiency. Carson happened to be walking by when they told me, whistling softly under his breath. Then my project approvals started getting delayed. Simple requests that used to take hours now took days. Carson would apologize with that same fake smile, his hands spread wide in mock helplessness. "Sorry, Kelly. Budget reviews are taking longer these days." My emails to Winston went unanswered. When I called, they said they hadn't received them. IT claimed there were no server issues. But somehow, Carson always seemed to know what was in those missing emails. He'd reference details from conversations I'd never had with him. My colleague Pamela pulled me aside one afternoon. "Be careful," she whispered, glancing around the break room. Her hands shook as she stirred her coffee. "Who? Carson?" She nodded. "I've seen this before. He's trying to get you to slip." I wanted to dismiss her warning, but deep down, I knew she was right. The timing was too perfect. The problem's too convenient. Carson was playing a game and I was the target. That night, I started keeping detailed notes of every interaction, every delay, every suspicious coincidence. My notebook filled up quickly. I arrived at work early on Friday to find 3 large boxes stacked in my office. Office supplies, staplers, paper, pens, folders, expensive stuff. I'd never ordered any of it. The boxes were perfectly arranged, like someone had placed them there deliberately. The morning sun streaming through my window made the plastic wrapping gleam. "Rebecca?" I called to my replacement assistant. "Did you order these supplies?" She shook her head. "No, and I don't see any purchase orders in the system." I checked my email, my desk, my filing cabinet. Nothing. No receipts, no approvals, no paper trail. Someone had put these boxes in my office without any documentation. The silence in the hallway felt ominous. My stomach churned. This felt like a trap. I called IT about the security cameras. Sorry, the technician said. The hallway cameras were down for maintenance last night. No footage available. Of course they were. I moved the boxes to the storage room and documented everything with photos. If someone was trying to frame me, I wasn't going to make it easy. My hands trembled as I took picture after picture. But as I locked my office that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already too late. The trap was set. Now Carson just had to spring it. Monday morning, HR called. Kelly, can you come in for a routine inventory check? My hands went cold. Inventory check? Standard procedure. Carson flagged some discrepancies in office supply expenses. We just need to review your recent orders. I sat in the sterile HR office while they flipped through purchase records. My name wasn't on anything. They knew it. I knew it. But someone had made sure those supplies ended up in my office. The HR director's poker face revealed nothing, but her assistant kept glancing at me nervously. We'll be in touch, the HR director said with a tight smile. I walked back to my desk in a daze. Pamela caught my eye and mouthed, "Everything okay?" I shook my head. That afternoon, Carson stopped by my cubicle. "Hey, Kelly, heard you had a meeting with HR today." "Just routine stuff," I said, not looking up. Good, good. He leaned against my desk. "You know, if there's ever anything you need to discuss, my door's always open." The fake concern in his voice made my skin crawl. He was enjoying this. His cologne mixed with the office air freshener, creating a nauseating smell. I could see the satisfaction in his eyes, barely hidden behind his mask of professional concern. The next morning, I was suspended. 3 weeks, pending investigation. The official report said suspected internal theft under investigation. I cleaned out my desk while the entire office watched. Some people whispered, others stared. A few looked away, embarrassed for me. Carson was nowhere to be seen. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything feel surreal and harsh. I drove home in silence, my career in ruins. By lunch, the rumors were already spreading. By dinner, former colleagues were texting me with concerned messages. By bedtime, I was the office thief. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications I couldn't bear to read. My phone buzzed. Unknown number? You didn't deserve this. I stared at the message for a long time. Someone knew the truth. But who? I spent the next 3 weeks at home, going crazy. I made lists, timelines, trying to piece together Carson's plan. He'd been so careful, so methodical, but nobody's perfect. My coffee table became covered with papers, charts, and desperate theories. There had to be something. Some clue, some mistake, some way to prove my innocence. I just had to find it. I called my friend Mike in IT. We'd gone to college together, and he owed me a favor. We'd been roommates senior year, and I'd helped him through his worst breakup. Now it was time to collect. "Mike, I need my keycard activity records from the past month." "Kelly, I can't just—" "Please, someone's framing me, and I need to prove it," he sighed. "Give me an hour." The records showed what I suspected. My keycard hadn't been used after 6 p.m. on any day that month, but someone else's had been. Carson's keycard was active in the building at 11 p.m., the night those supplies appeared in my office. The timestamp was crystal clear, 11:47 p.m. I screenshotted everything and backed it up to 3 different cloud accounts. This was my smoking gun, but I needed more. One suspicious late-night visit wasn't enough to clear my name. I needed to show a pattern, a motive, something that proved Carson's deliberate sabotage. The evidence had to be overwhelming, undeniable. I started mapping out his behavior over the past 6 months. The reassignments, the delays, the missing emails. Taken individually, they looked like coincidences. Together, they painted a picture of systematic harassment. My dining room table became a war room covered with printed emails, highlighted calendars, and connection charts. Now I just had to wait for him to make his next move. And I knew he would. His ego wouldn't let him stop. While I sat at home, Carson was making his play. He called the Winston executives personally, his voice dripping with fake concern and professional authority. "I have to inform you that Kelly has been suspended pending an internal fraud investigation," he told them. "I'll be taking over the account temporarily to ensure continuity." I heard about this from Pamela, who overheard the call. Carson was positioning himself as the hero, stepping in to save the day after my betrayal. His office door had been open just enough for her to catch every calculated word. The Winston team was shocked. They'd worked with me for 3 years. They trusted me. But faced with allegations of theft, what choice did they have? Carson had painted them into a corner with his lies. Carson scheduled a meeting with them for the following week. He was going to present himself as their new primary contact, their salvation from the chaos I'd supposedly created. His calendar was suddenly packed with Winston strategy sessions. He had no idea what he was walking into. The Winston account wasn't just about managing relationships. It required deep knowledge of their industry, their competitors, their internal politics. I'd spent years learning every detail, memorizing every preference, understanding every nuance. Carson was about to find out that replacing me wouldn't be as easy as he thought. His arrogance would be his downfall. 2 weeks into my suspension, my phone rang. Carson's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Kelly," he said, his voice strained. "We need to talk." "About what?" "The Winston campaign. The annual presentation is next week, and I'm having some trouble with the strategy documents." I almost laughed. "Trouble? Look, I know we've had our differences, but this is about the company. Can you help me understand the Q4 projections?" "The same projections you had delayed for 3 weeks?" The irony wasn't lost on me. Silence. Then, "Kelly, please. Winston is threatening to review their contract. If this presentation goes badly..." "That sounds like a you problem, Carson. I'll make sure HR clears your name. We'll say it was all a misunderstanding. Clean slate, fresh start." Now I did laugh. "You didn't defend me when it mattered. Why should I help you now?" I hung up. 5 minutes later, he called again. I let it go to voicemail. His desperation was music to my ears. The voicemail was 3 minutes of rambling pleas and empty promises. He was panicking, and it showed. All his confidence had evaporated now that he faced the reality of actually doing my job. HR called the next morning. "Kelly, we'd like you to return to work. The investigation has been resolved." "Resolved how?" "We've determined there was insufficient evidence to pursue the matter further. You're cleared to return immediately." No apology, no explanation, just a quiet reinstatement to avoid a lawsuit. Their legal department had probably advised them to cut their losses before I hired an attorney. I walked into the office with my head held high. Carson was waiting by my desk, looking pale and desperate. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. "Kelly, thank God you're back. The Winston presentation is in 5 days. And I'll handle it," I said coldly. "We'll handle it. Together. As a team." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Carson, I'll handle it, alone. Like I always have." He started to protest, but I was already at my computer, pulling up files. I had 5 days to rebuild a campaign from scratch. 5 days to save not just the Winston account, but my own reputation. It would be the best work of my career. And Carson would have to watch helplessly as I reminded everyone why I was irreplaceable. The other employees kept glancing over, sensing the tension. Word had already spread that I was back, and everyone was watching to see what would happen next. I worked 18-hour days for the next 5 days. Coffee became my primary food group as I rebuilt the Winston campaign from the ground up, incorporating new market research and fresh creative concepts that went beyond what I'd originally planned. The launch exceeded every metric we'd hoped for. Website traffic increased by 180% in the first week. Social media engagement was through the roof. Sales inquiries flooded Winston's customer service department. Mrs. Winston called me personally on Friday afternoon. "Kelly, this is extraordinary work. It's the most successful campaign in our company's history." I felt vindicated, exhausted, and oddly empty all at once. All those late nights, all that stress, just to prove what everyone should have known already. I was good at my job. Carson appeared in my office doorway that afternoon, wearing what I assumed was supposed to be a congratulatory smile. "Great work, Kelly. Really impressive turnaround." I didn't look up from my computer. "Thank you. I'm glad we could work through that misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. He actually called it a misunderstanding. I kept typing, not trusting myself to respond without saying something I'd regret. The following Monday brought the best news of my career. Mrs. Winston requested a meeting with our company's CEO to discuss the future of their account. She insisted that I remain as their exclusive point of contact, refusing to work with anyone else. Kelly Richards understands our brand better than we understand it ourselves, she told our CEO during the meeting. Any changes to her role on our account would force us to reconsider our partnership. It was the strongest possible endorsement from our biggest client. Carson's position as account supervisor became meaningless overnight. He still outranked me on paper, but everyone knew where the real power lay. I watched him during our next team meeting, how his jaw clenched when Mrs. Winston's praise was read aloud, how his fingers drummed against the conference table when our CEO announced that Winston had extended their contract for another 3 years. He smiled and clapped along with everyone else, but his eyes told a different story. This wasn't over. Carson wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. That evening, I found a printed article on my desk about workplace fraud and the importance of thorough investigations. No note, no signature, but I knew who'd left it. The attack came 2 weeks later, more sophisticated than before. An anonymous blog called Industry Insider published a scathing piece about Winston Corporation's new marketing direction, calling it tone-deaf and completely disconnected from their target demographic. The article was well-written and seemingly well-researched. It quoted unnamed industry experts and included detailed analysis of our campaign strategy. Most damaging, it specifically criticized elements that I had championed. Within hours, the post was being shared across social media. Marketing professionals were debating its merits in LinkedIn comment threads. Some defended our work, but others agreed with the criticism. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Mrs. Winston was furious. "Kelly, what is this garbage?" she demanded. "Our board is in an uproar. They're questioning everything about this campaign." I scrambled to explain that I had no idea where the blog post came from, that I stood behind our strategy completely, but the damage was spreading faster than I could contain it. By noon, our CEO had called an emergency meeting. Carson sat across from me, looking appropriately concerned and confused. The performance was convincing. The Winston representatives stormed into our office that afternoon like an invading army. Mrs. Winston's face was stone cold as she slapped a printed copy of the blog post down on the conference table. "What is this garbage?" she repeated, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Our stock price dropped 2 points this morning because of this article." Our CEO scrambled to do damage control, but Winston wasn't interested in explanations. They wanted accountability. Someone had to pay for this disaster. Carson stepped up like the hero he'd always imagined himself to be. "Mrs. Winston, I understand your frustration. While Kelly developed this campaign strategy, perhaps I should temporarily take over to help salvage the relationship." I felt the blood drain from my face. He was doing it again, using a crisis he'd probably created to position himself as the solution. "I have extensive experience in crisis management," he continued smoothly. "I can work directly with your team to address these concerns." Mrs. Winston looked from Carson to me, her expression unreadable. The room felt like it was tilting. "Fine," she said finally, "but this better be resolved quickly." Carson worked his magic over the next 48 hours. The anonymous blog post mysteriously disappeared from the internet. Screen captures were scrubbed from social media. It was like the whole controversy had never happened. He called another meeting with Winston, presenting himself as the crisis management expert who'd contained the situation. Mrs. Winston seemed genuinely impressed by his apparent connections and ability to make problems disappear. "How did you manage to get that article removed so quickly?" she asked during the meeting. Carson just smiled mysteriously. "I have my ways. The important thing is protecting your brand reputation." Our CEO praised Carson's quick thinking and decisive action. Other executives nodded approvingly. I sat in the corner, watching my career get hijacked again, feeling powerless to stop it. "Kelly, maybe you should lay low for a while," our CEO suggested after Winston left. "Let Carson handle the public-facing work until this blows over." I nodded numbly. Back to being invisible, just when I'd proven my worth. That night, another anonymous text arrived. "Check your email. The answers are there." The email contained an encrypted file and instructions for contacting someone called Max. I followed the directions, setting up a secure video call with a guy who looked like he lived on energy drinks and hadn't seen sunlight in months. "You, Kelly?" he asked, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses. I heard you need help with some digital detective work. Max turned out to be exactly what I needed. A cybersecurity expert with questionable ethics and an apparently unlimited amount of free time. He'd gone to college with Emma, who'd connected us through a mutual friend. Someone's playing games with you, he said after I explained the situation. That blog post didn't just disappear naturally. Someone with serious tech skills made it vanish. I told him about my suspicions regarding Carson, the convenient timing of the article, and how quickly he'd been able to make it disappear. Here's what we're going to do, Max said, cracking his knuckles. I'm going to trace every digital fingerprint connected to that blog post. IP addresses, browser data, metadata, the whole 9 yards. Within hours, he called back. Bingo, I've got a residential IP address tied to the original post. The IP address belonged to Carson Mitchell. Max had traced the blog post's creation to Carson's home computer, complete with browser fingerprints and MAC address data that provided irrefutable proof. This idiot didn't even use a VPN, Max laughed, showing me the technical evidence on his screen. The metadata shows he wrote the article over several days, saved multiple drafts, even spell-checked it. We had him dead to rights. Every keystroke, every edit, every moment of creation was documented in digital evidence that would hold up in any court or HR investigation. But I didn't want to go to HR. They'd already failed me once, choosing to suspend me rather than investigate properly. I had a better idea. Max, can you put all this evidence into a presentation format? Something that would be easy for non-technical people to understand? Absolutely. Power corrupts, but PowerPoint convicts. I scheduled a meeting with Mrs. Winston for the next morning. It was time to show her exactly who she'd been dealing with. The evidence was overwhelming, and I finally had the smoking gun that would end Carson's sabotage campaign once and for all. Mrs. Winston's expression shifted from confusion to outrage as I walked her through the evidence. The technical data was complicated, but Max had created clear visual representations that even I could understand. You're telling me that Carson Mitchell wrote that attack article about our campaign? She asked, her voice deadly quiet. Yes, and then he positioned himself as the hero who could make it disappear because he was the one who created it in the first place. She studied the printouts, her face growing redder by the minute. This is fraud. This is manipulation of our business relationship, I nodded. He's been systematically sabotaging my work to position himself as my replacement. The supply room theft allegation was just the beginning. Mrs. Winston stood up abruptly. Kelly, we want to offer you a position. In-house creative director for Winston Corporation. Double your current salary, full benefits, and you'd report directly to me. My heart stopped. What? We've been looking for someone who truly understands our brand. Someone we can trust completely. She smiled for the first time all meeting. Interested? The offer was everything I'd ever dreamed of. But first, I had one final request. The salary offer was incredible. Double what I was making, plus stock options and benefits that seemed too good to be true. Winston Corporation was offering me creative control over their entire marketing strategy, a budget most agencies could only dream of, and the respect I'd never found at my current company. But before I accepted, I had something to finish. Mrs. Winston, I'm extremely interested in your offer, I said, organizing the evidence files on her conference table. But I need to resolve this situation with Carson first. He can't be allowed to do this to someone else. She nodded approvingly. What do you need from us? Your presence at one final meeting, tomorrow at 2 p.m. That evening, I called HR and requested an emergency meeting with Carson, the board of directors, and Mrs. Winston. Patricia tried to ask questions, but I just said it was regarding the previous theft investigation and new evidence that's come to light. I spent the night preparing my presentation, organizing every piece of evidence chronologically. The keycard records, the digital forensics, the timeline of sabotage, everything that proved Carson's elaborate scheme. Tomorrow would be Judgment Day. Carson walked into the boardroom, expecting another routine meeting. Instead, he found Mrs. Winston, our CEO, the entire board of directors, and HR waiting for him. His confident smile faltered when he saw me sitting at the head of the table with a laptop and projector. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice uncertain for the first time since I'd known him. New evidence, I said simply, clicking to my first slide. About the theft investigation, the Winston campaign sabotage, and a pattern of fraud that goes back months. I started with the keycard data, showing his unauthorized access to my office. Then the supply room setup, the suspicious timing, the convenient camera malfunctions. Carson's face grew paler with each slide. The digital forensics evidence hit like a nuclear bomb. Max had created animations showing exactly how Carson had written and published the attack article, complete with timestamps and technical proof. "This is ridiculous," Carson sputtered. "Anyone could have used my computer." "The browser fingerprint is unique to your personal devices," I interrupted, advancing to the next slide. "This proves you personally wrote every word." The room erupted. Mrs. Winston stood up so fast, her chair toppled backward. "You sabotaged our business relationship for personal gain." Our CEO's face was purple with rage. "Carson, this is unconscionable. You've endangered our biggest client relationship and damaged this company's reputation." Carson tried desperately to shift blame. "The IT department has terrible security. Anyone could have hacked my accounts. This proves nothing." But the evidence was overwhelming. The board members passed around printed copies of the technical analysis, shaking their heads in disgust. One of them actually said, "unethical" and "fraudulent" in the same sentence. HR confirmed that the digital forensics would hold up in any legal proceeding. The unanimous vote came quickly. Immediate termination for cause, forfeiture of all benefits, and a recommendation that criminal charges be filed. "Security will escort you out," our CEO announced, his voice ice cold. "The same security guards who escorted Kelly out based on your false accusations." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Carson's face crumpled as the same uniformed guards approached his chair. Justice felt better than I'd imagined. News of Carson's firing spread through the industry faster than office gossip. By the end of the week, trade publications were running stories about corporate sabotage and the importance of digital forensics in internal investigations. My name was cleared publicly and professionally. Colleagues who'd been distant during my suspension suddenly wanted to grab coffee and hear the real story. Linked solution requests flooded my inbox from people wanting to connect with the whistleblower who brought down a corrupt executive. Carson's reputation was destroyed overnight. Max showed me screenshots of his LinkedIn profile views plummeting, connection requests being withdrawn, and professional recommendations disappearing. "Karma's a digital paper trail," Max joked during our celebration video call. But the best vindication came from other clients. 3 different companies reached out directly, saying they'd heard about my situation and wanted to discuss potential collaborations. Mrs. Winston called personally to reiterate her job offer. "Kelly, you showed incredible integrity and intelligence. We need people like you." I was ready to write my next chapter. My resignation letter was 2 sentences long. "I am leaving to pursue new opportunities. Thank you for the learning experience." I left it on our CEO's desk with a leather-bound binder titled, "How Not to Let a Narcissist Destroy Your Team." Inside, I documented every red flag I'd ignored, every manipulation tactic Carson had used, and specific recommendations for preventing similar situations. My last day coincided perfectly with Carson's final paycheck denial hearing. While he was downtown arguing with lawyers about his severance package, I was in the office receiving goodbye hugs and business cards from colleagues who wanted to stay in touch. Emma cried when I cleaned out my desk. "This place won't be the same without you." "It'll be better," I assured her. "Now that Carson's gone, maybe they'll actually value their employees." Jake from IT gave me a flash drive. "Emergency contact info," he winked, "in case you ever need digital detective work again." I walked out of that building for the last time carrying a small cardboard box and an enormous sense of freedom. My new role at Winston Corporation was everything I'd dreamed of. Real budget authority, creative freedom, and colleagues who respected my expertise instead of trying to undermine it. Mrs. Winston became both a mentor and advocate, introducing me to industry leaders and encouraging my professional development. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a marketing conference about workplace integrity and the importance of protecting employees from internal sabotage. The talk went viral online, generating thousands of views and speaking requests from other organizations. "You've become an inspiration," Mrs. Winston told me after watching the video. People need to hear these stories. I started consulting on weekends, helping other companies investigate suspicious employee behavior and implement better oversight systems. It felt good using my experience to help others avoid what I'd gone through. My life had become more fulfilling than I'd ever imagined possible. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best opportunities. 2 years later, I received an email that made me laugh out loud. Carson had started a consulting firm and was using a fake testimonial from Winston Corporation to promote his crisis management services. Mrs. Winston's response was swift and public. She posted on LinkedIn, "Carson Mitchell has never provided services to Winston Corporation. His claims are false and misleading. We recommend extreme caution to anyone considering his services." The post went viral in our industry. Carson's consulting firm folded within weeks. I closed my laptop that Friday evening, looking out at the city skyline from my corner office. The boy who'd called me a fraud was now exposed as one himself. The account he'd tried to steal had become the foundation of my new career. My assistant knocked on the door. "Kelly, your weekend speaking engagement confirmed. They want you to talk about turning workplace betrayal into professional success." I smiled, gathering my things. Perfect. I have plenty of material. He'd called me a fraud. Now I was the one writing the rules, teaching others how to fight back against workplace bullies and building the career I'd always deserved. Sometimes justice takes time, but it's worth the wait.